I never thought I'd see my son betray me, but that's exactly what I discovered behind the hidden door in the cellar. The moment I pulled it open, the air hit me differently, damp, metallic, and thick with secrets. Dust swirled around my head like ghosts of the past, and my heart hammered in a way I hadn't felt since I lost your grandfather. I froze, hands trembling on the doorframe, because what I found inside wasn't just a hidden room. It was a testament to everything my family had tried to hide from me. It all began with the spring cleaning I had promised my grandchildren. Grandma, Lily asked, tugging at my sleeve. Why does the cellar smell so sad? I forced a laugh, brushing her hand away. Old houses have old smells, sweetheart. But the truth was, I had always felt it. Something lingering here, a weight pressing down from years of silence and avoidance. I was moving a crate of canned tomatoes when my fingers brushed a cold metal ring embedded in the wall. My stomach flipped. A hollow echo answered when I tugged, and the hairs on my arm stood up. I whispered, no, this can't be. But my curiosity had already taken over. Well, the door was small, almost invisible behind stacks of furniture. When it creaked open, a cloud of dust hit my face, and the smell of old paper and mildew made me gag. Beyond it was a tiny room, faintly lit, and in the center sat a trunk locked and scarred by time. A label read in my son's handwriting, "Do not open." My chest tightened. I remember kneeling on the cold wooden floor, my hands shaking, fingers tracing the worn edges of photographs and journals spilling from the trunk. Faces stared back at me. My late husband smiling in the garden, my son as a boy, and a woman I did not know, whose eyes seemed hauntingly familiar. My mind reeled. How much had I missed? How little had I really known my own children? I sank to the floor, back against the wall, gripping a photograph like it was a lifeline. The rain outside tapped softly against the cellar window, mixing with the distant laughter of my grandchildren upstairs. They were blissfully unaware that beneath their feet lay the secrets that had turned our family apart. And yet, I knew I had to face it. The first journal I opened was my son's. The words were jagged, urgent, and full of hidden pain. I cannot tell her, not yet. She wouldn't understand, and if she did, she would never forgive me. Betrayal, heartbreak, and secrecy leapt from the pages like flames licking at old wood. I felt the sting of tears in my eyes, not just for what he had done, but for all the years I had lived in a polite illusion of family harmony. Hours passed in that hidden room, surrounded by letters, photographs, and journal entries. My body ached from sitting on the cold floor, but I couldn't stop reading. Each page peeled back layers of my son I hadn't known existed. And the photograph that slipped from the journal made my chest constrict. Him, with that same woman, her arm around him, smiling like she belonged there. I thought of my grandchildren again. How could I explain this to them? How do you tell little hearts that love and family are messy, layered with secrets, sometimes painful ones? Once I wanted to scoop them up, shield them, whisper that life wasn't always cruel, but the truth demanded patience. It demanded understanding. I pressed my hand to the photograph again, smelling the faint remnants of his childhood soap, the cologne I had bought for him once, long ago. And I understood something profound and terrifying. The life we thought we knew was only part of the story. The rest had been hidden here, waiting for me. Standing finally, brushing dust from my sweater, I whispered into the dim light, "I am ready to see you, even if it hurts." The wind rattled the window pane, answering back. This was only the beginning. What I would uncover next could either tear apart everything I loved, or finally explain why my family had turned away from me. I ran my hands through my hair, the chill of the cellar pressing against my shoulders. I could feel every ache in my body, every line of age in my face, as though the room itself weighed down on me. And yet, with each word, each photograph, each secret revealed, a strange clarity emerged. The distance between us had not been born from lack of love. It had been born from fear, silence, and circumstance. I thought of Lily and the others upstairs. How much of this should they know? I imagined sitting them down and telling them, a life is never simple. People hide, people hurt, but even in darkness, love remains. I wanted to shield them from the complexity, from the heartbreak, but I knew some lessons could only be learned through truth. The journal contained letters too, folded carefully, addressed to no one. I unfolded one and recognized his handwriting immediately. I fear she will never forgive me. She deserves to know someday. Perhaps when she is ready. Perhaps when I am gone. The words made my chest tighten. Forgiveness. That fragile, powerful act I had always believed in, now staring back at me from his pen. I understood then that the family I thought had betrayed me had done so out of fear, out of love twisted by circumstance. And I felt the sharp sting of sorrow, knowing how much had been lost to silence. I pressed my hand against the trunk again, and the journals slipped in my lap. I imagined my son as a boy, holding my hand after a fall, trusting me to keep him safe. And now, as a man, he had carried this burden alone, never letting me in. The parallel was unbearable. I could almost see the little boy hiding behind the man he had become, and I longed to reach him, to tell him I understood. Hours passed. Rain pattered softly on the windows above, the dim light casting shadows that flickered across the walls. I could hear the distant sound of footsteps, mine echoing back at me in the cellar. The room seemed alive, full of voices I had never heard but somehow recognized. My son, the woman, my husband long gone, and even the echo of my own younger self. They all whispered warnings, regrets, confessions. And through it all, I realized this room, this hidden place, was a sanctuary of truth, even if it was painful. I leaned back against the wall, feeling the cold seep into my bones. The photographs and letters were still in my lap, a mosaic of a life I hadn't fully known. My mind wandered to the years of strained dinners, the conversations that had ended abruptly, the silence that had grown like a wall between us. Now I understood. The betrayal wasn't one of love. It was of circumstance, of fear, of unspoken truths. And yet, anger rose anyway, sharp and bitter. I wanted to call out, to demand explanations, to shake my son and ask why he had chosen this path. But deep down, I knew the confrontation would come in its own time. This moment, alone in the cellar, surrounded by the remnants of hidden lives, was not about anger. It was about understanding. I imagined speaking to him now, holding the photograph between us, tears in my eyes, voice trembling. I see you. I know now. And even if it took decades, I forgive you. I could almost hear his response, the deep inhale before a confession, the quiet relief of a child finally understood by a parent who had never stopped loving him. The woman in the photos, I couldn't ignore her. She had been part of his life, a presence that had shaped him, protected him, perhaps even guided him when I could not. My first instinct was to resent her for taking space in the heart of my family. But as I read on, I realized that love is never simple. People enter our lives for reasons we may never understand, sometimes to protect, sometimes to heal, and I felt an unfamiliar warmth, a cautious respect for the choices that had allowed my son to survive. By the time I closed the last journal, night had settled over the house. The cellar, once merely a dusty storage space, now felt sacred, a testament to survival, love, and the complicated, often hidden layers of family. My body was stiff, my hands raw from handling the papers, but my heart felt both heavier and lighter. He had trusted me in the end, even if only indirectly, leaving behind a map of his truth for me to follow. I rose slowly, pressing the journals back into the trunk, closing it gently. I could almost hear him upstairs, the sound of his careful footsteps as he avoided me for years. And I knew, finally, that when we spoke, it would not be with blame or anger. It would be with recognition, with understanding, and with the fragile, powerful love that had never left us, even in the darkest shadows. The rain had stopped. The cellar smelled faintly of old paper and hope. I touched the small hidden door one last time, inhaling deeply, and whispered, "I'm ready." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the quiet of my bedroom, journals and photographs spread across the table, each one a whisper from the past I hadn't known. The house was still except for the soft hum of the heater and the occasional creak of settling wood. I could hear my grandchildren upstairs, their soft breathing like a lullaby, oblivious to the storm I had uncovered. By morning, I knew I had to confront him. My son. The boy I had raised, the man who had lived a secret life under the same roof for years, whose silence had cut me deeper than any harsh words could. I carried the journals with me as I walked up the stairs. Each step felt heavy, weighted with anticipation and fear. He was in the kitchen, making coffee. He looked up when I entered, surprise flickering across his face, quickly masked by caution. A mom? His voice was careful, hesitant, like he had been waiting for this moment but didn't quite know how to meet it. I placed the journals on the table between us. He found them, I said simply, my voice steady but carrying the weight of decades. I know everything. He froze, hands trembling around his coffee mug. For a moment, the kitchen was filled with silence, so dense it felt suffocating. Then he whispered, almost to himself, I hoped you never would. He hoped I wouldn't have to, I admitted, but I needed to understand. I needed to see why you turned away from me. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the boy I had raised, the one who had clung to my hand after a nightmare, the one who had hidden tears I didn't know existed, inside the man he had become. I was trying to protect you, he said finally. I didn't want you to carry this burden. I didn't want to hurt you. And yet you did, I said softly, though the words carried no anger, only sadness. By hiding it, by keeping me out, by letting the distance grow. Don't you see how much it hurt? He flinched, shame flickering in his eyes. I know, I was wrong, but I didn't know how to make it right. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you, or of you judging me. I leaned forward, placing a hand over his. The warmth of his skin reminded me of summers long ago, of scraped knees and whispered secrets, of bedtime stories and laughter filling the living room. That you were never in danger of losing me, I said. I just needed to be included, to be trusted. That's all. Trust and truth. Tears brimmed in his eyes. I could see the weight of years pressing on him, the fear, the guilt, the loneliness. And suddenly I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt sorrow, empathy, and a strange, fragile hope. Let's talk, I said gently. All of it. No secrets, no hiding. He nodded, and for the next few hours he told me everything. About the woman. Yes, she had been a lifeline when he was at his lowest. About the choices he had made, the mistakes, the shame. About the family he had wanted to protect, the distance he had created in the name of love. Every word was a dagger and a bomb at the same time, cutting open old wounds, but also beginning to heal them. I listened, sometimes holding back sobs, sometimes shaking my head in disbelief, but always reaching for understanding. I asked questions, and he answered, sometimes reluctantly, sometimes with relief, like a man finally unburdening himself. And as he spoke, I saw not just the boy I had lost, but the man who had survived despite fear, secrecy, and the weight of unspoken truths. We didn't solve everything that day. Some wounds would take time to heal, some truths were too complex for instant reconciliation. But the silence that had stretched between us for years began to shrink, replaced by conversation, by acknowledgement, by the fragile beginnings of trust restored. When the children came down for lunch, the house felt different. Lighter somehow, though the air still carried the remnants of old dust and secrets. I watched them, their laughter, their chatter, and I realized that my son's choices, though flawed, had not broken the family completely. They had hidden truths, yes, but they had also preserved love in ways I hadn't understood. Later that evening, I found myself alone in the living room, looking at the journals one last time before I placed them back in the hidden trunk. I traced the edges of the photographs, remembering faces, smiles, moments frozen in time. I understood now that family is never simple. Love is never straightforward. Sometimes it is messy, layered with mistakes, and built in shadows as well as in light. I touched the trunk gently, as if it were a fragile relic of the past. We're going to be okay, I whispered. Not perfect, not yet, but okay. And one day, you'll understand that truth and trust are stronger than silence and fear. That night, as I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. The house no longer felt oppressive. The cellar, once a place of hidden secrets and dust, now felt sacred, a reminder of survival, of hidden love, and of the truths that could finally be faced. I lay in bed, thinking of my grandchildren, thinking of my son, thinking of the life we had almost lost to fear and silence, and for the first time in many years, I felt a sense of hope. It was fragile, yes, but real. And I knew that when we faced the rest of our lives together, it would be with open hearts, with honesty, and with the enduring, complicated love that had always bound us. The hidden door in the cellar had been more than a secret. It had been a doorway to understanding, to reconciliation, and to the fragile beginnings of forgiveness. And I realized, finally, that even in the darkest shadows of our family's past, love had endured. The next morning, the sunlight spilled across the living room in golden streams, illuminating the dust motes dancing lazily in the air. The house felt different, somehow, as if the walls themselves had sighed in relief. I moved quietly, carrying a cup of tea, thinking of how fragile life can be, how long we sometimes wait for understanding, and how easily love can be buried beneath fear and silence. I found my son in the kitchen again, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. He didn't look up at first. I watched him for a moment, noticing the lines that hadn't been there when he was a boy, the weight in his shoulders from carrying years of secrets. I wanted to reach across the table, but instead I simply said, "You're here, you're still here, and that's enough for now." He looked up, and for the first time in a long while, I saw openness in his eyes. No walls, no shields, just the man I had always hoped he would be, the boy I had loved, grown and shaped by life's twists and shadows. He nodded slowly, a quiet acknowledgement of shared understanding. Later, the children gathered around me, curious about the stories I had promised them. I hesitated for a moment, wondering how to explain the tangled truths I had unearthed without shattering their innocence. Then I remembered something my mother had once said to me: children understand more than we give them credit for. They understand through emotion, through presence, through the honesty in our hearts. So I told them about the cellar, about hidden doors, about the journals that revealed not just mistakes, but fear, love, and survival. I didn't use names, didn't dwell on betrayals or pain, but I spoke of family as a living, breathing thing, complex, sometimes messy, always growing. I watched their faces as they listened, absorbing the weight of the story without fully realizing its depth. And in their wide eyes, I saw trust forming, the kind of trust that can endure even when life is complicated. The day stretched on, and the rain returned, soft and rhythmic against the windows. I carried a photograph with me, one of the journal's images tucked into my pocket, the one of my son with the woman who had shaped his life. I held it loosely, tracing the edges with a fingertip. I realized that forgiveness and understanding were not just about my son, but about the choices we all make, the paths we take, and the lives we build. Evenings in our home had always been ordinary, filled with quiet dinners, laughter, and the comfort of routine. But now, the ordinary felt profound. I could see the layers beneath each smile, each glance, and appreciate the depth of human experience in a way I hadn't before. I understood that love is not measured by absence or perfection, but by endurance, by the willingness to face truth, and by the grace to forgive. That night, I returned to the cellar one last time. I knelt by the hidden door, feeling the cool wood beneath my fingers. The journals were back in the trunk, tucked neatly, but I lingered, listening to the echoes of the past. I thought of my husband, of the boy my son had been, of the choices made in shadows, and of the fragile hope that had finally returned to our family. I whispered to the room, "Thank you for the lessons, for the truths, for the love hidden in plain sight." The air was still, as if acknowledging my words, carrying a faint scent of dust and old paper, mingled with the warmth of a home slowly healing. I climbed the stairs, each step deliberate, carrying with me the weight of memory and the lightness of newfound understanding. My grandchildren were already asleep, and I paused at the doorway, watching them breathe in the innocence that I so wished could remain forever. I kissed each forehead gently, my heart swelling with a mixture of sorrow, relief, and hope. As I sat in my favorite chair, the journals resting on the table beside me, I reflected on what had happened. Life had a way of hiding truth in the darkest corners, of separating hearts, even when love remained. But it also had a way of bringing us back together, of teaching us patience, empathy, and forgiveness. And in that realization, I felt an unexpected peace. I thought of my son again. I knew the journey of understanding was far from over. Trust would take time to rebuild, and there would be moments of doubt, of fear, of old wounds reopening. But now, we had a foundation, a recognition of each other's hearts, a willingness to face the past together, and the courage to move forward. In the quiet of that evening, I allowed myself a small smile. I realized that family is not defined by perfection, by absence, or by the mistakes we make. It is defined by love, by resilience, by the willingness to see one another through the fog of fear and misunderstanding. And it is defined by the stories we choose to share, the doors we choose to open, and the truths we embrace. The hidden door in the cellar had revealed much more than secrets. It had revealed the fragile beauty of human hearts, the complexity of love, and the enduring strength of family. And as I looked around the home filled with memories, laughter, and the soft hum of life continuing, I felt a deep, abiding gratitude. I stood, walking through the living room, pausing to touch the frames of photographs lining the walls, smiles frozen in time, moments of joy and sorrow intertwined. Each picture, each memory, each story was a testament to the life we had lived, the challenges we had faced, and the love that had survived despite it all. And as I looked at my family, both present and past, I knew that the legacy I wanted to leave was not perfection. It was honesty. It was courage. It was the willingness to open hidden doors, to face uncomfortable truths, and to forgive, even when it is hardest to do. Finally, I returned to my chair, the journals close beside me, and allowed myself to close my eyes. The house was quiet. I felt the threads of our family weaving together again, fragile yet strong, complicated yet enduring. And I whispered into the silence, "This is what love looks like. This is what family looks like. And this is the story you will carry forward, even when I am gone." The wind moved outside the windows, soft and steady, carrying away the remnants of old dust, of hidden corners, and of secrets that had lived too long in darkness. And in that gentle movement, I understood something essential. The past may shape us, but it does not define us. The choices we make now, the doors we open, and the love we share define the life we leave behind. And with that thought, I finally allowed myself to rest, knowing that our family, though imperfect, would endure, that our hearts, though tested, would remain connected, and that even in the quiet corners of the world, love has the power to illuminate, to heal, and to guide us home.